excuse me, I have to look myself if I can. Then you have one of the biggest inventions we made in the company, which is the 100th of a second. My grandfather invented that. It's even with a split. We have it with a split. And it's called the micrograph and microsplit. And we built this stopwatch for 60 years. There was no other way than mechanical to measure a short time. Right? Electronics had not come. And then suddenly, after 60 years, it was replaced by a digital electronic reading of the 100th. But 60 years, I myself, it was created in 1913 and we stopped it in 1973, right? 1916 and we stopped in 1963. 73 years. Yeah. Anyhow, 60
continuous
years.
Production.
Yeah. Well, we changed the dial a little bit, but basically it's the same type of movement. And it had an incredible influence on our brand because my grandfather decided not to sell it private label. And so they normally always has the brands. There are a few exceptions, but very few. And these are special collector's items, of course. But generally he was able to impose the brand on the watch, right? Very interesting thing. Then this was one way. The dashboard timers were an important part for our business. We sort of had a monopoly in that. This we produced 30 years. We supplied, the cars had no ways of measuring time initially. And this is a 12-hour dashboard chronograph. It's not just a watch. And here, you might see it here. There's a little hole on the left there, you see, at the 9. And it jumps right. It gets red when the chronograph is on, you see. And this is the minute register there, and the hour register down there for the chronograph part. So people wanted to know how long they were driving their car when it broke down and all these things. Then that's interesting because this is an Octavia, and it was so badly legible. I had it on my car and in my early years I had MGA and would rally. And I had that in my car. And then you cannot read the minutes if you look at it. It's so small. And I missed the Swiss Championship because I misread the minute by 1 minute. I misread it, right? Because in a bumpy car it's not so easy. So in a rally, so I said, finish. We don't make that anymore. And then we made this one, which became very important. It's called the Monte Carlo. Has a 12-hour jumping hour instead of a little 12-hour thing, and very reasonable central hands for the minutes and the seconds. Then here is, of course, our chronograph. This is later on. That's the chronograph we made, the first one to show 100th of a second. And we didn't go into production with it. We only made a pre-series, and then we stopped after, because we redid it now lately. And this is, we were, as some of you know, we were the world's largest manufacturer of handheld stopwatches. And so we were very concerned about the electronics. And so this was our first digital version in 1973. And then the technology changed so quickly that already 4 years later we had the same model in LCD, designed by a very famous Italian designer. And it was exposed in the MoMA, by the way, in New York. And this is our effort to follow the same in electronics. Here you have the world's first digital chronograph, which was so advanced that we couldn't make it. For time of day we had LCD, and for stopwatch we had LED. And a year later we made LCD. That's the way, the speed at which the semiconductors developed. And then we made this watch, which I still believe is the ideal. Personally, I believe that's the solution. You have a quartz movement for the time of day, and you had a digital display for the short time measurement. By the way, because I've been thinking a lot about how this all went over in the book you got. It took about 2 years when America started with the digitalization. And National Semiconductor and Fairchild had 2 factories in Silicon Valley, and they started making chips. And the first easiest application for a semiconductor on the little chip was to make a watch, because it only needed 3,600 memories. And 2 years later, according to Moore's law, they made a chronograph. And 2 years later, they started making calculators. And then they made, from 4 digits or 6 digits, they made 10-digit calculators and all the other things. And then suddenly, they moved on and made a little computer, right? And then they forgot about the watches. So no more watches from National Semiconductor and Fairchild. But it took the world, that's what I really wanted to say, it took the world about 2 years of digital time until they realized that the digital time is not really, it's more practical to have it in analog. Because in analog reading, you feel the time. In digital reading, you have to think, oh, 17:24, no, yes, oh, 6 minutes, you know, and otherwise you just feel, oh. And it took a time, and suddenly the digital watch was gone. There are very few digital watches on the market today. Maybe for the young generation, of course, but that's a different, not for our group or your group of people. Anyhow, here is nothing other really special. What I want to go on here is interesting.